So, but it's definitely a lot of work, and it's definitely more of a labor of love and a marketing tool than it is a revenue generating thing.
Everyone I've that has a book that I've talked to, they're like, it's more revenue. It's not revenue generating. It is bringing in the coaching clients, building authority,
Yeah, and then it just
premium.
depends on what you do with it, right? So, I mean, if the problem is if your book doesn't do well, the amount of time you spend versus what you get out of it is significantly lower, right? Because you have to look like an authority to be one, right? So if you go to it and it's not, doesn't appear that way,
If
then
you skimped out, no editor, misspellings, not well laid
yeah.
out.
And if it doesn't do well, also, that does not help either. So it's you just have to figure out what levers you want to use and what things you want to try, and then go from there. But a lot of it's somewhat useless, in my opinion. I've thought about doing another book, and I think, some really good ideas to sit down and do one, but I've taken a lot of time to think about it and sort of outline in my head, outline on paper and stuff, what it would look like, and would it be worth it, and would it move my business further, and other things like this. And I think you have to do a lot of research too. So it's an intensive process. Because I think the problem now is, like, if you were going to look
Spit out garbage.
but 3 or 4 years ago, I think you could do a book and it could be shorter, and there may be less content and research, and I think it could do well. But now there's so much noise that I don't think, if you have it very well thought out and researched and done, I
Uh-huh.
don't think you're going to get much traction out of it from people buying it and getting that much value out of the book. So that becomes the problem, right?
Okay.
You have to have it where the chapters and words matter, and things really have been edited and thought through in your own head, not necessarily the editor itself, but you. And that just takes a lot more time in order to make it worthwhile for you to put it out there and get what you want from doing it. So I hesitate to tell people go write a book, because I'm like, it is if you have an idea and you're willing to spend enough time on doing it. Because if you're not, maybe you put out a 30 or 40 page book that's something short that you can actually do the same process on, but it's on a really narrow niche thing, right? And I think that could work. But I would hesitate to have someone do a 70, 80, 90, 100 page book that's not really done, probably more of a 4, 6, 7 month process that you go through this and write and go back and forth and edit it and get it done. Because I don't think it's really going to do what you want it to do at that point. Because it's out there.
I get it. I think the only reason I considered it is that we looked at it. I do a business, a growth workshop, and printing the worksheets out in color the way I want them cost $10 to $20. And I can have the equivalent book with templates inside to write on done in China for $3.
Yeah. No. And the reason, honestly, the only reason I put it on Amazon is because it's an authoritative place, and I don't sell it other places, because what you want is you want to get more visibility on one platform. And if you sell it on a bunch of other ones, you're going to pretty much just be at the bottom of everything, and that's not going to help you. And Amazon's really the only thing that people look at that matters anyway. So, I mean,
same day free shipping.
Yeah, exactly. Right. If that's the case. So that's what I'm saying. Like, if you're going to do it, it really doesn't make any sense to do it unless you're going to sell it on Amazon. And, it's something that had spent some time on, or you're picking a very niche thing and writing something short. I just don't know the value in doing it, because the only other way it is, you have to have a huge following of people that are willing to buy the book and do it. But the problem there is that if you go through a publisher, they control everything, and they give you like no money. And you're doing it because you want to go through a publisher to get like the clout, but there's even less money through that, because they just take away all the money off the book, right? And you can't do anything. They told you have to do this, you have to do that, you have to go here, and you don't have a choice. That's just what you have to do, right? So it's and that's only for really high level. For the middle level publishers, like a lot of people self-publish because it's even worse, right? And you basically find that it's a complete waste of time at that point because they don't have enough clout to push it, and they make you do stuff and you can't do other things that you want with it. So it's really restrictive. It's an interesting process to go through it, but unless you really have a lot of cachet, you really are just like someone else's puppet, and they control what you do and how you execute on it. So I don't know what the upside is a lot of this stuff, right? I mean,
that's a lot of insight.
I think you have to be doing something that you believe could go viral. Whether it works or not, it's one thing, right? I mean, you can't know that, but you have to pick things that are. And I just think the book place is something that it could go viral 3-4 years ago or 2 years ago. I just don't think now. You have to have a really great book that you spend a lot of time on and has been rolling around in order for that to happen, which is not something that someone can just pick up and say, I want to go to a seminar and figure that out. You see what I'm saying? It doesn't work. It doesn't work that way. You'd have to go test out a theory and have it be true enough and something that's different that people aren't using, and then write a book around it and do the research and get it done.
And most people do that on a blog post now.
Exactly, right? And no one's going to want to spend the time and energy and money to get all of these things done and executed on, right? And if not, what happens is you write a very high-level book without a lot of details. And then the reality is people read it and it's all fluff, right? And smart people read that and they're like, that's just bullshit, right? Because the hardest thing to do is to get the details and not try to market most books are like 30% content and 70% marketing. There's very little content in most books when you really get down to it. It just isn't. And the ones that you find the most value are the people that give you the details, tell you what to do, and share with you a lot of it. But that's just very few people. Why? Because it's a way harder book to write, right? And it forces you then to give away stuff, and people are too afraid of living in scarcity and not abundance. But it's a whole different requirement. It's like when I did my TED Talk. If you look at the amount of TED speeches that are how-to speeches, they are single digits of the overall amount. It's very low because the requirement is I have to do a lot more work in order to write the speech, to give the speech, everything else. It's a whole other bar that you have to go. It's like kind of like running a 5K versus running a marathon. Giving a high-level speech, yeah, running a 5K is not easy, but
it ain't hard though either.
But doing a full marathon is a whole other level of training and what you have to do, and that's a requirement in a how-to speech because you have to create something someone can use and walk away with, and get hard facts and data, and really get in the trenches and get yourself dirty in order to produce it.
Now, your TED Talk, was that a how-to?
Yeah, it's a how-to speech.
Okay.
Because the other part of it that makes no sense is that if you think about it, you spend all this time doing a speech and then you finish it, and then it's some high-level thing. Well, in order to make it real for people, now it requires you to do all this work at the end to create something else out of it because you haven't given anyone anything. All you're saying is there's a problem and there needs to be a solution, and you identify it. But you don't tell them what to do, right? So you have to create that other part of it now afterwards and execute it, which to me is a whole waste of time because you should have been doing it on the front side, because now you don't really know what it is and you've got to create it and hope that it works because you've not tested it or done anything, right? You have to have another hypothesis to prove it all out, right? So it's in somewhat, because it's funny because I was sitting through speeches and someone did a speech in the afternoon that was about how to build, a really good culture. And after giving really specifics in mind, I looked at that and it was like, and I had a couple of friends and like, we agreed it was like almost intellectually lazy, because it's easy to say things are bad and erase all this stuff. But when someone else's speech is coming in there and saying exactly what you need to do and why it is, and down to the detail versus something high level, you as a person walk away from then saying, okay, well, I can do something with this one. I can't do anything with this, right? So I just think like people don't think these things through. And so a lot of this stuff is just like, you've got to really have a strategic game plan at the end of this whole thing and think through the whole process. But a lot of people just do a TEDx speech to do it for branding. And it's like, well, that may be good. The amount of time that you have to spend, it's like writing a book. It's just, it's a waste of time, because you can't do anything with it. And it controls so much of your time. It's better to sit back and watch Netflix, in my opinion, than do most of these TEDx speeches, because what are you really gaining out of it? You're giving up a whole lot. And your return is very little unless you go to a really good TEDx venue, and, get lucky. And today it's just so hard. I mean, there's so many people doing it, and you got to go to one that like has multi cameras, which are not that many to do. I mean, so you're getting and you have to do a lot of research, and it's a whole litany of challenges, and you'll be willing to do all that work and sit on it and do like I did from last May until August of the following year when I gave my speech. And if you aren't willing to do that, you just won't be able to give a great speech, and you got to hire a great coach, which costs a lot of money, because if you don't really know how to get up on that stage and give a speech, right? Because you know,
like a speaking coach, or
yeah.
Okay.
Because giving an 11, 10 minute, 12, 15-minute speech that you have to memorize, and then every word matters.
Yeah, I've heard that you have to memorize every single word of the speech.
Yeah, and you can't, and here's the thing, because it's being taped and stuff, you can't just say, well, I'm going to generally know it. You got to nail it cold. So it requires you to know all this. So you have to have someone who can help you get through a speech and know how to architect a short speech like that. Because in a 30 or 45 or hour minute speech, you don't need to necessarily worry about every word, sentence, or whatever, or every slide. But in this, everything matters, right? And you can't do ums and oh, like, you got to get this down really tight in order to execute it, because it's a videoed high quality production you're getting essentially for free that can never be redone. So you got to nail it, right? They do a little bit of editing for you, but they can't do that much. So you got to get it all in the take that you get it, right? So it's an interesting process, and I think most people really don't understand it and don't do enough thinking through. So it just becomes another writing a book, right? It seems nice in theory, but what are you really getting out of it?
Yeah.
It's wasting a lot of time that you could be spending doing anything else, right? But doing a TEDx speech a few years ago, I'd say it's completely different, right? Because the bar was way lower and the amount were way lower. Now, when the bar goes up, you now have to put in the required work to rise to the top, right? It's a lot harder to rise to the top when there are more people.
That's crazy.